Am I on the camera? You are on the camera. Excellent.
Hi, welcome. I'm Leo with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, and this is a presentation on understanding hurricane structural damage claims. Next slide.
The bottom right is the flood.
There it is.
Next slide. I always wanted to say next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about an introduction, which we're currently in, a brief overview of what storm damages are or not. Talk specifically about storm credit openings. It's a nice buzzword insurance companies are using to deny a lot of claims. IICRC guidelines, which are basically mold assessments, mold remediation guidelines, interior damages, some moisture mapping, stuff about windows, and then a conclusion to wrap it all up. And we're going to get through all that in 40 minutes. It's going to be exciting. Next slide. Who am I? I'm one of the founders of Beryl Project Engineering. I believe we've done work with most, if not all, of your firms before. I have licenses in engineering, inspection, mold assessment, mold remediation, wood destroying organisms, liquor distribution, certifications in inspection, project management, sustainability, certified master inspector, neutral evaluator for sinkholes. So I have been on the umpire side of the table. That's always fun to do. That should change the 20 years to 25 years, I guess, and a 203K consultant. A little bit about Beryl. We offer the gambit of inspections, everything from your pre-purchase home inspection to the point where the state of Florida had us do 18,000 inspections for the My Safe Florida Home program. We'll do commercial building analysis, FHA 203K and consulting inspections. That's the kind of sandwich your renovation loan inside of your mortgage. Windmits, 4 points, roof certs. This is the to get insurance batch. Then we start to differ from home inspection companies. We'll do structural evaluations, thermal imaging inspections, home warranty inspections, periodic construction inspections. One of our fastest growing areas outside of Hurricane Milton and Helene is the builders trying to take advantage of economic boom with a depletion of manpower and a depletion of good supplies. So construction defect, what we call 558 Florida statute, the inspections are going way up. I will also help with expired permits. We do a lot for a lot of roofers across the entire state of Florida with expired permits or just in lieu of the building department. I know when we had this order from DeSantis saying we could skip the permitting process, it was great. Everything was fast and dirty and a whole bunch of work was done wrong. Our fastest growing area is construction defect litigation. We'll also do reserve studies. I know most of you might have heard about the Surfside Tower collapse in 2021. Condominiums are still suffering today from the amount of extra paperwork that needs to be prepared for their buildings. Next slide, please. So the first area that's going to be relevant for you in claims is we don't get involved unless there's a dispute. Public adjuster goes out there, writes up the little estimate, field adjuster goes out there and everything's fine. We never know about these things, but I'm just going to assume we're all here because the insurance companies are all under marching orders to deny claims. It's deny, defer, all these things that they're games they play. We've seen crazy from the standpoint where the field adjuster will write out a juicy estimate and then a field adjuster will get fired from the case. New field adjuster will pop in and start denying the claim. Engineers that spout language that isn't even relevant that we fight all the time. So I'm going to focus first on repair versus replace. These are arguments you guys can make, and the first bit of juicy information for you. If the roof is before 2007, before 2007, building code goes into effect. So you might have a roof as late as 2008, mid 2008, still, as long as it's before the 2007 Florida building code, that 25% rule is still in effect. What that says is that more than 25% of your roof is damaged, and you have to repair that, you have to replace the whole roof. That then triggers the deck renailing, which is really what's pushing it. They want the deck renailed to meet the new uplift requirements, to stop that cyclical deflection that sometimes happens. So what we do with the over 25% damage, pre-2007, we're mostly looking at tile roofs and metal roofs at this point. The insurance companies have fought really hard to get 15 years only on a shingle roof, and it doesn't matter. It's 3 tab, 30-year architectural, 50-year dimensional. They all want them to only last 15 years. And with House Bill 1121, just have to say not a lawyer, House Bill 1121, they actually got that into the condominium side of things to define shingle roofs at 15 years. They've also defined modified minimum roofs, which only last 12 to 20. So there was a little bit of silver lining there. You know, made extra years on roof material that shouldn't be there. But you'd lose 15 to 20 years on a shingle roof, which is going to fill our landfills, hurt our environment, a whole bunch of other things. We also preach obsolescence. ITEL, those that deal in tile roofing are very probably familiar with ITEL reports. Your Moniers, your C-tiles, your Entragas, they are no longer being rated as category 1. ITEL are going to be your boneyards. They're going to do reports saying at a boneyard, you're more likely to find some of these replacement tiles. Category 1 means you can find pretty darn good match. You probably can go to the boneyard and get 50 to 100 tiles, take them to a job site to repair. We're now finding on those particular ones, we're finding categories 2 and 3. 2, they are recommending whole slope replacements. These tiles are not a good match. These tiles, basically, they're interlocks. And you've seen a tile before, and we'll look at some later in the presentation. They have this like ridgy thing. You get tiles that match ridgy thingies, they line up and it holds. If they don't, you get point loading. Point loading causes structural issues on the roof. These tiles are more likely to crack, more likely to be damaged. ITEL saying either category 2 on these types of tiles, which means full slope replacement, or category 3, which means full roof replacement. So the boneyard excuse is getting harder and harder for these insurance companies to use. You can challenge them on matching. There's a Florida statute on matching. So even if you were able to find tiles in a boneyard, they might not match in color. So you end up with a roof that looks like Swiss cheese. Another one was my favorite, Tamco GAF. Shingle manufacturer, had a beautiful color called weatherwood. Back in the day, it was brown. That same color now is gray. Still calling it weatherwood. So that's going to have a matching issue. So if the original shingle installation was weatherwood and it's older, it's the brown color, you can't put the new one on, even if it's the same color, it's going to look very different. Tiles, I mean, you have all sorts of things. Well, we'll paint your whole roof. Well, that damages the tile. It helps decreases the breathability of the tiles. So matching is a strong one to use. Now, with shingles as a whole, they're generally multicolored asphalt. When you look at a sample board of shingles, you're looking at the darkest actual color that would be in that mix. So matching on shingles is a little tougher. Here's the other one we're using now. Let's say the roof is past 2007. We're still saying these repairs cannot reasonably return your roof to pre-loss condition. Like we're post 2007. I had this with Hurricane Ian. 90% of the roof was damaged. The insurance company just wanted to pay for a repair. You can't repair 90% of the roof. I mean, I still argue 50% as reasonable. Everywhere else in the Florida Building Code, if it's more than 50% damage, you don't repair it, you replace it. So I start arguing that on the shingle roofs post 2007. I don't care that it says the 25% rule doesn't apply. There's another section of the Florida Building Code, the existing building code, that says if more than 50% of a component's damaged, it needs to be replaced. So yeah, I'll give you that between 25 and 50%, but I'm not giving you that above 50%. And even then, I'll often take the stance that based on this section of the roof with the damage it has, you can't return this section to pre-loss condition. So some of the things you might want to be thinking about is instead of arguing the roof as a whole, start arguing about sections of the roof. Because the Florida Building Code talks about sections of the roof. And if you can get sections of the roof covered, then you can say these sections are over 25%. We got to do the whole roof. So start thinking about individualized sections of the roof, that'll help. And then cascading damages. That's one of my favorites. We'll salvage tile from the front, from the back of the property that you can't see from the street, put it at the front. Great. Salvage tile, love it. Cascading damage. Think about a bowling ball heading down a lane at Splitsville towards bowling pins. The bowling ball hits the first pin, that pin hits the ones behind it, and then those 2 pins will hit the 3 behind it, and hopefully those 3 pins will hit the 4 behind it. That happens when you manipulate a roof. When you get a roof that's too brittle and you lift it to replace that one shingle, you're causing a lift on the 2 shingles behind it. You cause cascading damages. Now, there was a ruling back in 2021 that said that the extra damages caused during the replacement can't be taken into account for the equation on the 20%. It basically means that if you cause any damage doing repairs, that doesn't count towards your 25% replacement rule. That doesn't change the fact that it's still gonna happen. If you got a very brittle tile, even if you had the ability to change it out, you're still gonna damage tiles around it. Now you're just, again, repairs cannot return to law, roof to pre-law condition. That's what we argue over and over again. So when I'm being deposed, these are my 5 data points that I'm using to get the roof replaced. Next slide. In addition, we'll be arguing about storm damages. I'll be talking about, and these come straight from the National Academy of Forensic Engineers, December 2020 edition. Broken tabs, broken tiles, lifted shingles, kicked tiles, which are those that are kicked up, crease shingles, which are my favorite. I love explaining to a jury how to find a crease, the difference between a storm-created crease and an age-related or person-related crease. Missing tabs, missing tiles, those are easy. Impact damages, those are easy. Stain sheathing is my storm-created opening. Damaged soffits, vent metal warping. But back to the broken tabs and lifted shingles. I'll spend a lot of time in depositions talking about when a shingle ages and wear, tear, and deterioration, common defense. That one sits with the shingles are just old. And I'll sit in deposition after deposition and say these shingles aren't old. When a shingle hits the end of its useful life, you have a surfboard, and on top of that, you have roadway. The roadway starts to fall off, and you're left with the surfboard. You'll end up with frayed edges around the side of the shingle. You'll end up with a silver streaking you can see from the street on the shingles. You get close to the shingles, and you won't see granules anywhere near the edge or middle. There's this tool, a lot of field adjusters will use, a Hague tool, and they'll slide it into a shingle into say 30, 15. That tells you how much useful life's left. I use those photos time and time again to disprove age-related deterioration because I'm like, the own tool that they don't know what it means, they just know to take the photo, is saying this roof doesn't have any age-related issues. We start to see that the shingles start to break, the seals start to break at the edges, and then you end up with little cups that form. That's an age-related deterioration. Then you end up with creasing, and we do have one in here coming up that shows creasing diagonally. If I have creasing diagonally across this little area right here, that's age-related or man-made. But if I have my creasing here horizontally, right about here, 2/3 of the way up the screen, that's always going to be wind-related. So that's the shingle as a whole flapping up and down. So that's the way we disprove age-related deterioration. Again, the shingle as a whole doesn't exhibit the frays, doesn't have diagonal creasing at the corners. It's got horizontal creasing, that's storm damage. And I have yet to be disproved by any of these other experts that that is storm damage. They'll all say it's age-related, but they can't argue successfully against that. Next slide. Here's some pictures. This would be a good example of an old shingle. We have all this missing granules here. We have this crease here going this way. This is the bad stuff. This is stuff we don't want to find. I do have some creasing here, but with all this stuff here and here, I'm going to say that's probably age. This is a broken tile. This is in a good high foot traffic area. It's a nice circular hole. I got something coming in. It's going to be foot traffic. I look for this. I look for the hole. I look for radial cracking from where the foot hits. It's in a high impact walk zone. That's going to be more age related. This one's another bad example of a broken tile for wind because it's in a corner. It's got an apex crack that goes across here, so that's going to be from pressure. So what I do like using are right corner cracks. They'll say that's the weak part of the tile. I'm like, great, yeah, it's the weak part of the tile. That's the first thing to get wind damage. That's the way I spin it. They're like, the manufacturers even know this is the weakest part of the tile. I would expect to find right corner breaks on wind damaged roofs because that's where wind's going to manifest first. Next slide. Lifted shingles. Again, we've got something that's kicked up in this direction. Newer roof. You'll hear stuff about mat transfer. What that's talking about is right here. This is the sealant. Sometimes it sticks to the top of the shingle. They say mat transfer is used to say it's not wind related. I say it is wind related. The shingle's been forcefully torn up, and some of the seal is now on both parts of the shingle. So I look for that in my wind damages. Here's some kicked tiles. This is a whole section here that was removed by wind. High impact wind zone. I want sissy damage according to the hips. I've also got missing pieces of tile here. This is in the upper right hand corner. Again, stress cracking from wind because that's chattering. Same thing here. So this is some juicy storm damage right here on both of these. Next slide, please. Crease shingles. Again, we're looking for this line here, and I had more that were subtle. But I wanted to have some that you could see from a distance, because I've been in presentations with the chart. You can't see it, so kind of went a little bit more obvious on this, but I'm used to this light creasing here, something even a little lighter than that. I'll use that with the jury. I'll show a jury how to find crease shingles at this point in the shingle, and then they start finding it themselves later in the photos. These are slip tiles. What I like about slip tiles is two things. If it's held in place by a fastener, that means the fastener hole is enlarged, that tile is damaged in the area you can't see. I do that all the time. If it's gravity held, even better. The tiles have all slid out of place and now there's a whole bunch of holes underneath there in the underlayment. But what's neat about the slip tiles with a fastener is that that tile has cracked and allowed the tile to slide down, that nail hole is shifted, and those are all potential storm graded opening points. So that's fun. And then here's our mega slide of, I don't know, showing everything. Flapped over shingle, creased shingle, there's a subtle one, torn tabs, missing shingles, just blown off. This is a horrible example picture that was pulled from stock photos. So I'm creating that for our viewing enjoyment. And the reason why I can tell is because this is too perfect and none of these nails are rusted. So here's an example of some missing tabs. This is more like what we'd expect to see, very jagged at the top. And then, obviously missing tiles or missing tiles. So stain sheathing, here comes the storm created opening argument. I will argue a causality effect. We are not going to remove every shingle to see the holes that were created in the storm event. But if we have staining in the room that we're standing in the interior, and we have staining above that in the attic level, either at the trusses or at these junction points, we have staining in the attic and we have staining in the interior and we have functional storm damaged shingles at the roof level, that's a storm created opening. Now you'll hear stuff about wind driven rain. Well, if it was wind driven during a storm event that went through a roofing system and it hasn't leaked since, it's a storm created opening. Storm created openings conceal themselves after the fact. The mere fact that water came into the building during a storm event is a storm created opening. The exception would be if there was a vent and the water blew into the vent and then came down. That's wind-driven rain. But all this other stuff they're talking about, wind-driven rain, those are all storm-created openings. It's functioning fine up until the storm. You now have stain sheathing. So all you have to do is show functional damage directly above where we have all this stain sheathing, and we start to draw the parallel causality effect, which wins time and time again. To do that, next slide, please. Oh,
We talk about that again later, that comes in a later
Okay.
slide up.
I thought that was a good beginning for that. So the other thing we looked at is you'll get arguments that, and Rimkus and Haig love to use this one, these are the areas of the roof that we would expect to see damage first. That chart, table 301 in the Florida Building Code. I would agree with them. Normally, those would be the areas that expect to find damage first. However, the Florida Building Code makes up for that because you need to build that section of the roofing material with starter ships, extra nails, extra bowl, which is the sealant, all the stuff you don't use in the rest of the roof. So the argument goes away when you say, yeah, because these areas are more prone to wind damage, they're actually built stronger. So you can't actually use that as a guideline for when we find all that field damage we talked about earlier, because that wasn't built as strong. So instead we flip it. We look at the soffits and the fascia. Yeah, we have damage, wind damage here and here. We have suction damage here. We have drip edge damage here. We have basically fascia damage here, all related to wind. Still in the strongest part of the roof, but why aren't the shingles damaged? The shingles aren't damaged because they're built much stronger than the rest of the roof system. That becomes a good argument to use against the Rimkus and the SDII arguments, or Haig, that are saying that these areas of the roof should be damaged first. Yes, if it was built the same, and it just wasn't. Next slide. We look for suction damage on these soft metals. These are like soda cans up on the roof. So we look for crinkling here on these guys. My favorite tile roofs, 4-foot offset vents. Those crinkle and crush like a can. I love seeing that. I love seeing that on a Hurricane Ian claim at this point that are rusted. If they're rusted, it's Ian. If they're not rusted, it's Milton. Takes about 2 years for that rust to set in. Next slide, please. Now we're to where I should have moved the stain sheathing. If we do this again, move the stain sheathing here. So how do we?
Slide is storm crated opening.
Yeah, so how do we create the causality effect, the storm credit opening? Well, we use sample squares, so scientific method. We as scientists are allowed to use a sample size to determine a hole. We try and avoid something called being technically exhaustive. We don't want to, I mean, the best way to inspect a roof would be to tear off the entire roof, look at the entire underlayment, and then look at the entire sheathing. That's not gonna happen. The next best thing would be to inspect the entire roof, try and lift the bonds on every single shingle, also not gonna happen. So in 2004, Hague came out with a test square methodology that they used for hail damage. Basically, find 100 square feet of roof, take a look for how many hail strikes are within that 100 square feet. And then if there's more than 8 hail strikes within that 100 square feet, the whole roof needs to be replaced. Well, we started using it for wind damage claims, a piece of it, not the 8. Again, we're going back to the 25%. Hague has now come out and publicly discredited their own methodology. So now we have shifted how we're presenting it. We're no longer saying it's the Hague 2004 test square methodology. We're saying it's a scientific method, sample square methodology. Still works. So now Hague has just discredited their own methodology for no reason, because we still have a way to use it. So we set up a 10 by 10 square, and we take a look at the shingles directly in that square for damages. And we'll do 4 of them. We'll set up one on each roof face to see what kind of the wind damage would have occurred. Now you'll hear talk about windward and leeward forces. They love throwing these things around to try and deny claims. Well, a whole roof wouldn't be damaged in a storm event because there's windward forces and there's leeward forces. The way I explained it to a jury is back in high school, you learned in physics, you push up against something, it pushes back against you. So the windward forces are pushing up against the roof's pushing back. And when the leeward forces are pulling away from the roof's reaching up to grab them and pull it back down. So we would expect to find damage to all the faces of the roof. So sample square methodology, no longer called test square methodology, called sample square methodology, still upheld in court, still upheld through Daubert challenges. We look at these and we're just going to outline the damages. These are going to be lifted shingles, these are creases, here's impact damage. Nice, easy to show to a jury. Very easy to show. This is the amount of damage in this one section of the roof. And then we can extrapolate this out over the rest of the roof. As a scientist, we have a sample size. Now we've done this 4 times on the roof. It's repeatable. And we extrapolate that out to show that, well, this one's got 37, 15, this has got, there's 75 shingles in a square, that's 75% of this area is damaged. Again, this will overcome 2007 post roof saying, hey, it's repairable. It's not. This one's got 50. So again, this one we'd argue both of these, you can't, even if this roof was 2 years old, this roof was 2 years old, we still argue you can't return this roof to pre-loss condition without a complete replacement. So what we've done now is we've shown this is probably somewhere in this square is that interior damage. So now we've got functionally storm damaged shingles directly over roof sheathing, directly over interior damages. That's a storm credit opening. The storm didn't cause that damage, that sheathing wouldn't be leaked.
Do you suggest taking your sample square where there is?
Go directly over it.
Yep.
Directly do your sample squares over it, because now we got storm credit openings. You want to do it, it's the easiest way to show it. You say, I'm standing in my living room looking up, I'm in my attic above the living room looking up, and now I'm on the roof looking down. Damage, damage, damage. It tells the complete story. CRC guidelines. So basically now what I love to do is, there's this common misconception, and I have to do this in every single, you probably know what I'm about to say, in every mold assessment in a deposition, they're like, what kind of mold is it? Did you send it off for laboratory testing? You do not have to do laboratory testing. It is such a common misconception. It is a test question, mandatory to get your licenses. It is a mandatory test question on all the CEs to maintain your license. You do not have to test to know what the mold is. If it's present, it needs to go. If the drywall has been wet for more than 72 hours, there's enough literature out there to say some level of mold exists there. So you can start tying into your claims some level of mold remediation. I know there's caps and limits on that, but that gets you drywall cut out, not repainted, That gets you entire rooms repainted. If the stuff's touching the baseboard or the flooring, we got flooring that needs to be removed, and you guys all love the continuous. If it's continuous, we've got to do the whole, so this is how we get there. All we need is something that's wet for 72 or more hours. So with a Hurricane Milton or an Ian, where power was out for 96 hours, we're there. We've got mold there. Might as well just start including it. Mold will be divided into 3 categories and 4 classes. Categories. Where did the water originate? Drinking water, basically from the sky. Gray water, stuff that's run through pipes and stuff, but started off as clean water. Or black water, sewage and stuff that's run, like if a supply line breaks, I'll go clean water or gray water. If a sink faucet breaks or something, that's going to be black water. So the thought behind that, other mold assessors take the stance of, if it comes from the sky but it's made its way through your roofing material, is it still technically clean water? I take the stance that it originated in the sky, so I would call it clean. So for pretty much me, I pretty much stick to categories 1 and 3. Next one. The next one's the fun one. The class. Class 1 you want to avoid. That's like my fishing tank exploded. I got to the water really quickly, I mopped it up. We want to stay away from class 1. Class 2 though, if that fishing tank is on a carpet and it explodes, and I happen to be gone for work for the day. Class 2, carpeted pad. Class 3 is going to be drywall insulation, so that's going to be roof leaks. You're going to need mostly class 3. It's gone through your drywall, gone through your insulation. Window leaks are going to be the same thing as class 3. And then class 4 is when you have the black water on your tile, hardwood, concrete, stucco, the stuff that naturally should be resistant, but it's contaminated with some nasty crap. Literally crap, because it's sewage. Next slide, please. So here's some examples. Again, we don't need anything as extreme as this. This light staining here, I'll sit in deposition and I'll say, well, this is just some drywall staining, but this darker gray and this darker black, that's going to be mold. All we have to do is prove it's been there for more than 72 hours. We can say there's mold there, needs some level of mold remediation. Here we've got this one, possibly roof, possibly AC. Anytime I see an attic access hatch with a leak right next to it, I got to rule out the AC. So you can't assume all of this is going to be related to the roof. You have to rule out plumbing pipes. So there are plumbing pipes going across. HVAC, we try and stay away from anything with a vent. So if there was a vent there, there was a leak right next to it, we'd probably try and stay away from it, unless we can definitely see sheathing above it in the attic space. But yeah, I can argue mold right here. I can argue mold right here. This one, I'd probably say these occurred at the same time, so I would argue mold there too. Next. The way we're going to find this out, we're going to use thermal cameras, predator vision for the Arnold Schwarzenegger's hiding in the jungle bush. Or they're going to use moisture meters. So the neat part about the thermal camera, that gets us in the area of the potential. Then we can either hit it with a thermal camera and it's going to be wet or dry. If it's wet, it's an active leak. If it's dry, but shows up like this, that's a former leak. What's neat about this is I can tell all the insulation's been pushed away. So that insulation is not how they installed it. The only thing that would have caused that are going to be rodents who decided to take that insulation elsewhere, which wouldn't be this level, or a water effect that pushes all this insulation down towards the ground, and now you're just left with that temperature differential. So even if the leak isn't active, we can still use thermal cameras to prove that it happened. Hence, tie back to a storm created opening. It was leaking during the storm event, it wasn't leaking after. More proof it was storm created and storm sealed. Still needs to be remediated. Next slide, please. I want to talk about windows. Love windows. So if you look at FEMA P62 and 752, you look at the North American Fenestration Standards 2017, 2022, they'll talk about pressures that are necessary to overtake windows. They're a lot lower than you think. People will think they're putting up storm shutters to protect their windows from hurricane pressure. No, it's just hurricane debris. I have seen windows blow out and shatter with sheathing plywood or storm shutters on the windows. Those shutters are just there to stop debris from coming through. They're not there for the pressures that are generated from these storm events. So you have to think your house is normally under positive pressure. And if you think about how we track hurricanes, we track them by their pressure. It's moving at 75 miles per hour gusts with 989 millibars. And then they get to 899 millibars, and now we're looking at category 5, 155 mile per hour sustained winds. Fancy physics equation, PV equals nRT, explains the science behind that. But when it comes time, and Shay's heard me do this before, I never track the wind speed of a hurricane. I'm always tracking the pressure. Lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. Even if the storm starts to weaken, the lower the pressure was, the more energy the storm has. And that was the big talk about Milton, was the fact that once it became a category 5, we were still going to see these devastating winds no matter what wind speeds it actually hit when it hit St. Petersburg, and we saw that from the Trop roof. The energy that happened when that thing was category 5 is what took out the Trop roof, not the 90 mile per hour winds that hit that. So it takes roughly 35 mile per hour sustained winds to start to overtake normal windows. Really low. So we start to see seal failure, we start to see screen tearing, we start to see some of the glazing has some kind of warping to it, as low as 35 mile per hour sustained winds. We get to 60 mile per hour sustained winds, we're now overtaking hurricane impact windows. Again, it's for impact, it's not necessarily for wind pressure. Next slide, please. So we start to see areas here, we start to see like the argon glass that's in a dual plane window, we start to see that's all fogged. We can hit it with thermal cameras, we can see the energy just leaving, but this is what we're looking for with seal failure. Seal failure, it happens to a window, the glass needs to be replaced. Can you replace the glass reasonably without replacing the whole window? Well, different arguments in different directions there. Next slide. These are from impacts. I think this one might have been a raccoon. It's not photograph here. This is like a raccoon attacking a window. That's a new Blumhouse movie that's coming out next month about the wolf man. This is what happened to this window.
Feral child.
Yeah, that's an impact. So basically we're looking for impact damage to the window, but we're mostly going to find the seal failure like we saw on the one before it. Next slide. Broken glazing, love it. Love it, shattering the windows. Damages, not even shattering, not even full shattering. We just have that's what we're looking for. But again, seal failure, thermal cameras, that's mostly what we're going to be using, because this stuff is great, but we don't find it too often. And then we look for separation of the framing. They'll argue maintenance. In some time, there's something called the SIBO analysis, where even if you have damage from lack of maintenance, if a storm event caused further damage, the storm event damage is still covered. So even if they're saying wear, tear, and deterioration is a defense, something called SIBO, S-E-B-O, can be used to overcome that if there's concurrent damages. So concurrent damage language is fun, and some insurance companies are better at others at cleaning that language up. But I hear Citizens still has some SIBO holes in their language that you can use. Next one. Dented frames, again, usually from some level of impact or from massive pressure that's going to be exerted on this style of window. Because these are your releases, so this is more of an impact resistant window. It's very rigid, this is softer, it's a weaker stress point. And that's where your structural failures happen, and they happen at these weaker points. It used to be the window was the weakest point. Now it's the framing around the window that becomes the weakest point, which is why your seals break, which is why your frames on the inside will dent and deform, is because the pressures overtake those components, but your other things are fine. I often laugh when there's like, oh, these hurricane clips will protect my roof. Yes, your whole roof will come off in one chunk. We've seen that numerous times. The whole roof comes off in one big piece. The shingle's awesome. Underlayment's fine. The roof is next door. So it's just still a system, and they have yet to figure that part out. Next slide, please. Just next. Just next. We also look for drywall damage around windows. These will be other areas we try and find. Find mold. We're going to look for that staining. We're going to look for that staining around here. That's pretty nasty looking in this area. I would argue there's mold there, so I could tie this back to the storm event. We're good. And then we have cracks around the drywall. This is the exterior, so ignore the caption here or ignore the fit photos here. Drywall cracks around the windows. So when your house is under, and I talked about this earlier, windward and leeward forces, you've got cyclical deflection happening to the roof, to the window walls. You have suction pressure happening. So basically what's happening is your house is breathing during the event. It went from positive pressure to negative pressure. So the house is flipped to how it normally sits, starts flexing, it starts breathing. That starts to develop cracks again. And usually I have examples in the room I'm in, but I'm not used to being in conference rooms that are new. So I keep looking around for them. But you end up with this breathing of the building envelope. It's going to cause cracks on the inside. It's going to cause weak points in the drywall to start to develop cracks. It's going to cause them around the windows to start to develop upwards off the window. Upwards cracks off the window are lovely for me. That's structural stress. That's the way it manifests. It manifests upwards. This downward kind of cracks, I kind of don't like those. This crack's probably caused by this penetration here and water getting into it on a normal basis. And then this is getting in from bad caulking and painting around the windows. There's rebar right here that's going to rust. I would expect in 10 years this whole window sill to fall.
That is it.
Awesome. So right on schedule
Good
too.
minutes for questions.
So yeah, I got some questions. Here's some information, how to email us, how to call us, how to find us on the web, how to find us on the gram, how to find us on the book, how to link to us. So yeah, more than happy to answer some questions. I know I covered a lot of the material fast. I want to show as many pictures as possible. The key is, if you're making a claim, you don't buy into the bullshit of the standard defenses. And one we didn't talk about, my favorite is tile roofs, thermal expansion and contraction. This is my favorite one, and I love this. And lawyers have stopped asking me in depositions about this because I get really excited. Let's say I have this lemonade. And this lemonade was in a glass container, not plastic. And I threw this into the freezer. And then came back 4 days later. I would basically have shards of lemonade sticking out of, I would have shards of glass sticking out of a block of lemonade. Water, as it cools, expands. Tile roofs, they try to use that same logic on tile roofs. Tile roofs is an insulated material. We've been using it as a building material for thousands of years. It resists these heat and cold changes. So if you do the math using the pure science of it, if you had a tile that was 10 feet long, so about as wide as this table, and as long as this table. So if your roofing square consisted of one tile, and you subjected it to a temperature swing of 100 degrees in a 6-hour period, it would move the width of a human hair. That's the raw math on thermal expansion contraction. Let's move that to Florida, relative humidity. We don't have these temperature swings. We have captured heat. I'm from Texas. It's 100 degrees outside. I do this, I stand under a tree, I'm 15 degrees cooler. That does not happen in Florida. I do this, I am still sweating just as much, only now I don't have the sun to evaporate. And so with thermal expansion and contraction, because we have that high relative humidity that traps moisture in the air, we don't get that width of a human hair movement on a tile that big. Take into account tile is 13 inches by 17 inches. Take into account our temperature swings might be 30 to 40 degrees. Take into account any potential movement of that tile from thermal expansion and contraction against a wind force is laughable. And that's what you say. It's just laughable to think that that kind of movement is going to overtake something when you're going to say wind didn't do it.
Well, and they use tile in almost every desert city and community, and they have those temperature swings.
Yes, it is an insulated material. It's used for that reason. So that's a common one that we hear against. I've already taught you about wear, tear, and deterioration against shingles. This new one that's popping up that we're starting to do, and we did some of this on Fort Myers Beach, the timeline of storm surge versus wind damage. That's going to be more present for Helene and Milton. The timeline of storm damage versus storm surge versus wind damage. And it's just collecting data. Collecting data, you can actually collect data on the level of the storm surge versus the wind chart on when wind was actually created. SDII made a beautiful graphic. They wish they never did in Fort Myers Beach, and I used it on every one of my depositions now against them. Basically, they proved, without realizing it, that the 140 mile per hour winds came 2 hours before the 9-foot storm surge. So again, usually the winds are going to come first and the storm surge is going to come second. The difficulty, it's easy on the roof, the difficult part is the windows. when we approach a house now and all the drywall from 0 to 4 feet is gone. What are we gonna look for on damages that say that this is wind related and not storm surge? We're gonna be looking up. We're gonna be looking for those cracks going up off the windows, saying, no, these windows became compromised. This water came in because of the wind. Not because of the storm surge, and that it's lining everything up. If your winds were stronger than 35 mph sustained before the water got high enough to enter the property, I can argue that it's wind related and not storm surge. So that's something to keep in mind on these. But yeah, it's gonna be tough. We had Helene and Milton 10 days apart. I had a lot of headaches with Ian and Nicole 2 months apart. It was arguing that Ian brought the winds, but not a lot of rain. Nicole brought the rain, not a lot of winds. So the damages that you saw manifest from Nicole actually started at Ian. That's what I had to do for a while now. Here we've got something similar with Helene and Milton, but 10 days apart. We're not gonna tell the difference between the two. We're just gonna say, hey, this damage occurred around this time. Either way, it's a named storm event. Either way, it's in the policy period. And the only thing that would really trip that up is if you happen to have a policy period renewed between the two storms. And we're hoping not to see any of those, because I really don't have an answer for that. And well, what I do know is at least you didn't change insurance companies in that 10-day period because the markets were all closed. So it's an existing carrier's policy renewing between those two storm events that I don't have an answer for. Because we're still gonna say the damages were from both storm events. Now we'll say geographically, it might be more likely for Milton. Because Milton is a stronger event for the southeast part of the state, and we would say Helene for the northwest. So we could do that, but in reality, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between the two.
And if they already tore out from Helene, like,
Yeah.
don't even bother. Because the evidence is gone, so what we can kind of been going on the assumption of.
Yeah, I mean, if they had like town and country that got flooded from Helene, they got walloped by Milton. Well, they had already been doing all the tear out from Helene, so we're gonna say it originated with Helene. Would have been made worse by Milton. We have several that we're inspecting for Ian still post Milton, and we're saying, well, Milton made it worse. GAF Technical Bulletin 8 talks about that once a roof has become storm damaged, it is easier to become damaged in the future. So we'll say, yeah, Milton made this worse, it originated then.
Yep.
So that's the other stuff.
They hated that after Ian. Now, I noticed Milton, they've started to realize that, but this, like the Sample Square, we have full neighborhoods 7 years old after Ian, that yes, 2 shingles were increased or removed. But the whole thing was lifted and they wouldn't repair. Well, guest workers they're now paying for it.
Yeah, Milton's doing the damage.
Exactly.
We have a question from the chat as well.
Cool.
This is from Hayla. She says, what do you look for to push back against faulty, defective construction maintenance repair?
Oh, awesome.
Especially when staining is below prior repair, but no leaking since the repair.
So 2 separate pieces there. The insurance company's denial will be, it's wear and tear deterioration, it's been there forever, and installation defects. Well, if you heard me earlier in the presentation, I said I do a lot of construction defect work. I also do a lot of permit installation work. If you have a bad roof install, you know about what I'm about to say. If your roof is gonna fail from bad installation, it's gonna fail in the first 2 years. I say if you make it past a rainy season without a roof issue, your roof is probably installed correctly. If you make it 2 rainy seasons, you are installed correct. So installation issues would manifest during the very beginning of the roof's life. But now you've got a scenario where you had a roof that was damaged. You had a roof that was repaired, that repair area now becomes damaged again. What we're gonna do is ignore that for our analysis. We're gonna take a look at the rest of the roof. We knew the rest of the roof was fine. This one area was damaged, this one area became damaged again. Might not have been a good repair, might have been a great repair. We're gonna take a look at the rest of the roof. We're gonna start aging the damage on the rest of the roof. Now, we're either gonna find the damage on the rest of the roof is older damage, which we will let the attorney, public adjuster, whoever hired us know. Or we're gonna see that the damage is newer damage, and we're gonna say, hey, I can say with certainty, engineering degree of certainty, not 100% certainty, but engineering threshold of certainty, that this damage is newer, and then we can use that. But yeah, the repair areas, I hate it. I hate seeing that this was leaking this was leaking from Irma, And the same area is damaged on Ian. Like, well, what else do you got that's damaged up there? We really gotta start painting a larger picture. Because the insurance companies, they love pushing back on the. Well, this was previously damaged, this was older damage, we have proof of this being older damage. I'm like, yeah, damaged here, but not this part of the roof, this rest of the roof is fine. You had your people all over it, your people said the rest of this roof was fine.
Thank you for your question, Ava. Any other questions? We have about 7 minutes left.
Awesome.
I got a bunch, but it's all case specific, so I won't waste everybody else's time. Well,
No, I mean, it could be good examples, maybe without using the names of cases.
oh yeah, no, so, and I'm kicking myself right now because we just did, truss repair and dry end for it. So we can start on the interior, but, tree strike, tile roof, truss damage. But also you start getting into, tiled walls in a recently renovated bathroom. And verifying, behind that essentially, and without going through the hallway.
So normally when a tree strike happens and we can see the trusses are damaged and we want to see further down the wall, usually the best way to go is through the drywall. It's a lot more difficult on the outs, like if you're trying to look at the stucco to see if the block is broken or if it's wood framed. I mean, it's more difficult to go from the outside. Now you're dealing with the bathroom. Take a look at the tile, see if they're, well, it's new, they're probably gonna be more resistant, but are tile, some of the tiles kicking out? Are any of the grout lines, kind of, that stuff kind of falling out, like looking along those lines to see that collateral damage that indicates that something might have shifted on the inside. Now, from what we've seen with dealing with a lot of tree strikes, is the trusses have become damaged, the walls have absorbed some of the load, but it passes the load straight down the ground. So we're not seeing a lot of the wall damage we would expect to see, unless the tree has hit it at a wall. The tree strike is further up the plane, then we're mostly seeing that the walls have absorbed and pushed the load down without damage to the frame.
And but of course, yeah, because we had some good gusts coming in. But as far as like the moisture, so I mean, when this tree hit, it was very early on in the storm, so it dumped water inside, so the bathroom. Vanity's out, you can drywall there, but but we're talking closets, master bedroom.
Well, that drywall is gonna come out anyway, and then you can look at that one.
Okay,
Yeah, because if you're describing a situation where the trusses were damaged, the sheathing was damaged, water was pouring in on the side of the wall, and you have tile there, then you got mold.
okay, and that's,
Yeah, now we're back to the mold part. I mean, anytime you've got all that water in there, that's gonna be mold. And I often get tile on the plumbing pipe breaks or these mold cases because the water gets trapped under the tile. The water's sitting there, the mold remediation companies come in, they punch holes everywhere, they do all this air circulation, they don't do anything under the flooring. So as the water evaporates, it's an exothermic reaction, so it's like a small explosion. That small explosion damages the thin set, damages the grout, and that's what starts to cause the tiles to debond. So we would say the tile needs to be replaced because the tile is now unbounded or damaged, and there's mold under there too. That needs to be replaced, especially on a black water case, where there's any sort of sewage involved.
Any last minute questions?
Well, I thank you very much for attending our presentation. Hope you've learned something. If you can fight one insurance company, you can fight them all. We'll choke up here.
they're very emotional about this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I do insurance defense work and is one, I am a neutral evaluator. I do myself on my own biases. When there is damage, we call it. When there is not damage, I'm calling it. We've had mechanical damages, man-made damages. Public adjusters have gotten a little overzealous over the years on the roof plans. I don't support any of that. So I mean, it's legitimate damage, legitimate damage. If it's not legitimate damage, I'm gonna tell you it's not legitimate damage. Stand firm on that. But a lot of this stuff, the SDIs, the EFIs, the RINKIS, hey, the stuff they try and tell you is not. Storm damage actually is. And that's the purpose of showing you guys some of the stuff for your appraisals. Is how to point it out to your umpire that no, this is actually wind damage. This is why this is wind damage as opposed to what they're saying.
Hey, listen, thanks, Leo, super forward.
Okay.
Thank you for coming, David.
And we recorded this,
We did, we're gonna stop it,
Um,
right?
yeah,